So, you're looking for signs, aren't you? Clues, whispers, little nudges from the universe telling you this one is different. Funny thing about people, they beg for confirmation. But when it comes, they doubt it, tear it apart, search for flaws until they convince themselves it's a trick. But when it's real, when it's meant, it doesn't need glitter or thunder. It just sits there, quietly undeniable. No matter how much you try to run from it, you feel it in the stillness, in the way your chaos finally slows down, in the way everything broken in you suddenly makes sense standing next to them. Signs repeat until you notice. That's the way it works. You ask for answers, you cry for clarity, and when it shows up, you wave it off like it's coincidence. You call it luck, timing, imagination. But it keeps coming back, doesn't it? Same feeling, same face, same whisper you can't shake. Life doesn't hand you neon lights, flashing with certainty. It drops the same clue in your path again and again, until you're forced to admit it's not an accident. And the funny thing is, the more you try to ignore it, the louder it gets. Not with sound, but with weight. A heaviness you can't explain, a pull that drags you back no matter how far you run. You think you're clever, brushing it off. You think you can outsmart destiny, dodge the signs, convince yourself you're in control. But there's no hiding from what's meant. Every time you turn away, something pushes you right back to it. You hear a name when you're not listening, stumble across a memory you swore you buried. Feel that strange jolt in your chest when they're near. You tell yourself it's random. Random doesn't repeat itself. Random doesn't follow you into your dreams. Random doesn't haunt you in silence. The signs don't come dressed in fireworks. They come in patterns. The way the same conversation echoes from two different mouths. The way the same thought burns in your head until you finally speak it, only to find they were thinking it too. The way the universe seems to bend, pulling you into the same orbit no matter how many detours you take. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's the kind of certainty people pray for, then throw away because it feels too simple, too obvious, too undeniable. And here's the thing. Denial is always easier. It's easier to believe it's nothing. Easier to shrug it off. Easier to pretend you're not seeing what you're seeing. Because if you admit the signs are real, if you accept that they mean something, then you have to face what comes with them. Fear, responsibility, vulnerability. If you admit this connection is confirmed, then you can't hide behind the safety of uncertainty anymore. You have to step into it. And stepping into it means risking the parts of yourself you swore you'd keep locked away. But no matter how long you hide, the signs will wait. They're patient. They don't disappear just because you pretend not to see them. They keep knocking, gentle at first, then harder, until eventually it's impossible to ignore. And when you finally stop running, you'll realize they were never trying to convince you. It was you trying to convince yourself not to believe. Signs repeat until you notice, because life knows how blind people can be. Too busy, too distracted, too wounded to see what's right in front of them. So the signs circle back again and again until they break through the noise, until they become so undeniable, so painfully obvious, that you're left with only two choices: accept it or spend the rest of your life haunted by what you refuse to see. And deep down, you already know which one it is. You knew it the first time. You felt it before the proof, before the patterns, before the whispers started surrounding you. The signs didn't show up to create the truth. They showed up to confirm what you already felt. That's why they repeat. Because they're not there to convince your heart. Your heart already knows. They're there to silence your doubt. And until you finally let go of that doubt, they'll keep circling, keep pressing, keep reminding you that destiny doesn't need your permission to be real. True connection feels undeniable. You can try to explain it, break it down into logic, twist it into coincidence, but somewhere in your gut you know. It's that unshakable feeling that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. You meet thousands of people, shake hands, share laughs, pass by strangers every single day, and it's nothing. Empty. Forgettable. But then there's one, and suddenly it's different. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just this strange certainty that you can't put into words. You don't choose it. You don't plan it. You don't even expect it. It just arrives like it's been waiting. And once it's there, you can't pretend it isn't real. People like to play tough, pretend they're in control. They tell themselves, it's just attraction. It'll fade. It's nothing special. They bury the feeling under excuses, try to smother it with distractions. But the truth has a way of clawing through. That's what makes it undeniable. It doesn't need your permission. It doesn't wait for your approval. It just is. And no matter how much you resist, no matter how far you run, the connection pulls at you, drags you back, reminds you it's still alive. You feel it in the smallest things. The way silence doesn't feel empty with them. The way your thoughts slow down when they're near, like your chaos finally found a rhythm. The way their presence lingers, long after they're gone, echoing in your mind, like a song you can't stop humming. You can lie to yourself, but you can't escape the way your body reacts, the way your heart skips without asking, the way your mind wanders to them when it should be anywhere else. That's not an accident. That's not just chemistry. That's connection. And it's not always convenient. In fact, it rarely is. The timing doesn't line up. The circumstances don't make sense. Your fears scream louder than your faith. But the connection doesn't care about your schedule. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It shows up when it's meant to, not when it's comfortable. That's why it feels so overwhelming, because it cuts through all the barriers you've built, all the defenses you thought would protect you, and leaves you exposed. It doesn't ask if you want to feel. It demands that you do. You can deny attraction. You can dismiss infatuation. But connection breaks denial. You can't unfeel it. You can't unsee it. You can't go back to before you knew it was there. You can pretend, sure, but the pretending eats you alive. Because every time you try to fill the space with someone else, every time you try to move on like it was nothing, you'll feel the difference. You'll realize what's missing. You'll realize what you can't replace. And that realization hurts more than admitting the truth ever would. True connection doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't need to. It sits quietly in your chest, steady and unrelenting, until you finally admit it's there. That's why it feels undeniable. Not because it's loud, but because it's constant. It doesn't fade when the excitement dies down. It doesn't vanish when things get difficult. It lingers patiently, stubbornly, as if it knows something you don't. And maybe it does. Maybe it knows that what's real doesn't need to force itself. It simply waits until you're ready to face it. The world is full of noise, full of people, full of distractions. You could spend your whole life chasing empty sparks and calling it love. But when true connection shows up, it burns different. It doesn't scream for your attention. It changes the way you see everything else. That's why it feels undeniable. Because once you've touched it, once you've tasted it, once you've felt it in your bones, there's no going back to ordinary. Ordinary feels hollow. Ordinary feels fake. Ordinary feels dead. And that's the truth most people run from. They'd rather settle for comfort than admit they've found something that could break them open. Because true connection demands risk. It demands vulnerability. It demands you stop lying to yourself and finally face what's been in front of you the whole time. You can run, you can hide, you can deny it until you're blue in the face, but none of that changes what's real. And what's real doesn't let go just because you're scared. That's why true connection feels undeniable. Because deep down, you've already decided. You just haven't admitted it yet. Clarity often hides in silence. People expect answers to come loud, dramatic, wrapped in lightning bolts and thunderclaps, as if truth has to announce itself with a bang. But it doesn't. Truth is quiet. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't shout over your noise. It waits. And in the moments where the world finally shuts up, when the distractions fade, when it's just you and your thoughts, that's when clarity creeps in. Not as a scream, but as a whisper you can't shake. The kind of whisper that gnaws at you, follows you, unsettles you, because deep down you already know it's right. That's why people fear silence. It strips away the excuses, the justifications, the little lies you use to drown out the truth. When everything gets quiet, you're left with the raw, unfiltered reality of what you feel. And it scares you because once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You can ignore noise. You can argue with chaos. But you can't argue with that cold, steady voice that surfaces when nothing else is in the way. Silence is a mirror, and clarity hides inside it. Think about it. How many times have you been surrounded by people, distracted by chatter, busy enough to keep yourself from thinking, and you felt fine? Then later, when you're alone, when the noise fades, when there's no one to perform for, suddenly the truth shows its face. The silence doesn't invent it. It just unmasks it. That's why clarity hides there. Because only in the stillness can you stop pretending long enough to actually feel. And the funny part is, clarity is never complicated. It's not a puzzle. It's not wrapped in riddles. It's simple, obvious, plain. But simple is uncomfortable. People want complicated answers so they can keep running in circles, convincing themselves they don't know what to do. Complicated keeps you busy. Simple forces you to act. That's why clarity comes quietly. It doesn't waste time with explanations. It just tells you what is. And what is can be terrifying because it leaves you no place to hide. Silence strips away illusions. You can lie to others. You can even lie to yourself in the noise, but in the quiet. The lies don't hold. You can't escape the pull you feel. The weight pressing on your chest, the certainty you keep trying to bury. That's why so many avoid silence at all costs. They fill their days with endless noise, endless distractions, endless chatter. Not because they're busy, because they're terrified. Terrified of what they'll hear when everything else stops. But clarity doesn't care about your fear. It waits. It waits until you're exhausted, until the distractions wear thin, until the mask slips, and then it surfaces again. Same answer, same truth, same undeniable pull. And every time it comes back, it feels stronger, not because it grew, but because your excuses grew weaker. Silence doesn't create clarity. It reveals it. And once it's revealed, you can't bury it again, not without tearing yourself apart in the process. And here's the cruel part. Clarity doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it tells you to let go of what you've been clinging to. Sometimes it tells you to face what you've been avoiding. Sometimes it tells you that the thing you've been running from is exactly where you're supposed to be. And that's why it hides in silence. Because in the noise, you dismiss it, laugh it off, argue with it. But in the silence, there's nowhere to run. You're forced to sit with it, to feel it, to acknowledge it. Even if you hate it, clarity is patient. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't shove itself down your throat. It just waits in the quiet, repeating itself until you're ready to stop lying. And the more you resist, the heavier it feels, the harder it presses, until eventually the silence becomes unbearable. That's the signal. That's how you know clarity is speaking. When the quiet isn't peaceful anymore, when it's loud enough to rattle you, when it doesn't let you rest, it's not punishing you. It's forcing you to finally see what's been right in front of you the whole time. So when everything gets quiet, when the world stops spinning for just a moment, pay attention. That's where the answers are. Not in the chaos, not in the shouting, not in the endless search for proof. Clarity hides in silence, because silence is the only place you're honest enough to hear it. And once you hear it, the noise will never fool you again. Doubt battles what the heart already knows. That's the war inside, isn't it? The heart whispers one thing, steady, certain, stubborn. But the mind is a noisy little monster. It questions. It twists, it plays tricks, making you second. Guess what you've already felt deep in your bones. The heart speaks in truth, the mind in fear. The heart says, this is it. And the mind says, but what if you're wrong? And so you spin, caught between something pure and something poisoned, trying to figure out which voice to trust. Doubt is clever. It doesn't scream, you're wrong. No, it whispers, are you sure? Just enough to plant the seed. Just enough to shake the certainty you thought you had. And once doubt takes root, it grows fast, choking everything in its path. It convinces you to replay every word, every look, every sign, searching for cracks, searching for mistakes. The heart doesn't work like that. The heart doesn't keep score, it just knows. But the mind builds walls out of fear, because doubt is its favorite weapon. And the cruelest part, doubt feels safer. It convinces you that questioning is protection, that hesitation is wisdom, that pulling back is strength. But really, doubt is just fear dressed in reason. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being wrong. Fear of losing something before you've even had it. The heart already knows. But the mind doesn't like not being in control, so it wages war, tearing apart the certainty, demanding proof, demanding guarantees that life will never give. You've felt it before. That pull in your chest. That strange peace when you're with them. That voice in the silence that says, this is yours. That's the heart. It doesn't care about logic. It doesn't need evidence. It just recognizes what's real. And every time you feel it, for a moment you believe it. But then the mind swoops in. What if you're imagining it? What if it's one-sided? What if you're blinded by hope? And just like that, doubt shatters the clarity you already had. The irony is that doubt never fights fair. It doesn't care about truth. It only cares about control. It'll take one tiny crack and stretch it into a canyon. It'll take one unanswered question and turn it into 1,000. It'll turn whispers of fear into roars that drown out the steady rhythm of the heart. But here's the difference. The heart doesn't need to fight back. It doesn't argue. It doesn't shout. It just keeps knowing. And that's what makes doubt so maddening. Because no matter how many battles the mind wins, the heart never surrenders. That's why people feel torn in two. Because no matter how loud the doubt gets, it can't erase what the heart already knows. It can bury it, cover it, hide it under layers of fear, but it can't kill it. That truth lingers, waiting for the day you're tired of fighting yourself. And when that day comes, when you've exhausted every excuse, every justification, every clever reason to stay away, the heart is still there, whispering the same thing it whispered the first time. People waste years in this war. Doubt keeps them frozen, afraid to move, afraid to trust, afraid to admit what they feel. They keep waiting for the mind to line up with the heart, for the logic to finally approve what the soul already chose. But logic never approves. Logic always finds another hole, another reason, another what if. And all the while, the heart stays steady, holding the truth that you keep pretending you don't see. The tragedy isn't that people doubt. The tragedy is that they let doubt win. They let fear disguise itself as caution. Let hesitation disguise itself as wisdom. Let overthinking strangle the simple truth. They call it being realistic, but really, it's just being scared. And in the end, all doubt does is delay the inevitable. Because the heart doesn't forget, and the truth doesn't change just because you're too afraid to accept it. The heart already knows. It always knew. Doubt is just the noise that tries to bury it. But no matter how deep you bury it, no matter how many times you silence it, the truth has a way of clawing back to the surface. And every time it does, you're reminded that the war was never between right and wrong. It was between fear and faith. And fear only wins if you let it. Destiny doesn't need loud proof. People are obsessed with signs, with miracles, with thunder from the heavens announcing every step they're supposed to take. They want clarity wrapped in explosions, flashing lights pointing the way, undeniable evidence that screams, "This is it." But destiny doesn't play by those rules. It doesn't need to shout to be real. It doesn't need to put on a show to be true. It shows up quietly, steadily, in ways so subtle you almost miss it, until you realize it's been there all along, guiding you without asking for recognition. The loudest moments aren't the ones that matter most. The truth slips in through the cracks, in the details you ignore, in the coincidences you swear don't mean anything. But how many times does something have to repeat before it stops being coincidence? How many times does the same path open, the same face appear, the same feeling strike, before you admit it's not random? Destiny doesn't need fireworks because it has consistency. It has patterns. It has weight. It doesn't convince you with volume. It convinces you with persistence. The problem is, people don't trust quiet answers. They think if it's real, it should shake the ground. They think if it's meant to be, it should feel like lightning striking. But the truth, lightning burns out. Fireworks fade. Noise dies. What lasts is steady. What's real is calm. Destiny doesn't come to impress you. It comes to anchor you. It doesn't explode in your face. It roots itself in your soul. And that's why people miss it. Because they're too busy chasing the loud and ignoring the certain. You've felt it before. That strange peace that doesn't make sense. That quiet pull that doesn't fade no matter how much you argue with it. That's destiny. It doesn't demand your attention with chaos. It just waits for you to stop pretending you don't see it. And deep down, you always feel the difference. Everything loud eventually feels hollow, but the quiet things, they echo, they stay, they grow.